Thank you for joining us today for On the Road with Jesus, hosted by Rhodey Fisher. As a Christian mom for over 40 years and a teacher of the Bible in public schools for 25 years, Rhodey will take you on a journey with some of her friends as they share their experiences and testimonies from their walk with Christ. You'll see that you are not alone in your search for God, your victories with Him, or your failures. Welcome to On the Road with Jesus. Now, here's your host, Rhodey Fisher.
Hey, Susan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here on this episode of Stop Digging Podcast.
Today, we have a special guest. Her name is Rhodey Fisher, and she's a very inspiring woman. She's done so many things in her life and has had a really cool journey.
I've known her for over 20 years. She has her religious beliefs. She interacts with all different cultures, all different religions. She has so much experience working in multiple workplaces. And she has an ethos that very much fits in with what A Squared Lamp Groups does and how we treat people. Even her own background, Hawaiian and Chinese, has given her an additional layer of perspective and experience that allows her to really interact so well around the world.
Rhodey is a radio and podcast host at Hope Radio and KPRZ with a program called On the Road with Jesus. And she's been a teacher of the Bible for over 30 years. She's an accomplished entrepreneur, successful director and manager with 40 years of experience in team building. We're really excited to talk to you. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Nancy and Susan, for that great introduction and just being friends. Yeah, I was born in Hawaii. I was the fourth child of 5 kids. Both parents were very strict with our Christian beliefs as well as strong on education. My mother spoke fluent English, fluent Hawaiian. She spoke Chinese to her Chinese side of the family. Her dad, my grandfather, came over to Hawaii, did not speak a word of English, and opened up a grocery store and an import-export business. Growing up in Hawaii, I just melted with everyone since there was a lot of diversity, a lot of Hawaiians, a lot of Chinese, a lot of Caucasians. My mother raised us in like an Asian atmosphere in terms of good grades. You must go to college. In 1972, I came here to California, and I found very quickly that people thought I was Hispanic. The atmosphere at the time in the early 70s was if you were brown, you were either American Indian or Hispanic. And when I would say Hawaiian, people went into this mode, couldn't speak English. They didn't know, number one, that I could speak English. Number two, that we had modern homes that we lived in. Unless you were in the military.
So after you got to California, how did you get started? And what type of industry did you go into?
The first job I had this Mexican friend that taught Mexican cooking, and she thought that she could make a living out of teaching how to cook Mexican food, because who doesn't like a taco when they come to California?
I would learn that class and eat tacos till the day I die.
We became fast friends, and she needed a little sous chef. So we would prepare all the things early, and the class would show up, and we would make whatever she had on the menu. She later said to me, "Why don't you teach some Hawaiian cooking?" And I said, "I don't think people know too much about Hawaiian cooking. My mother's Chinese. She made every Chinese food you could think of, as well as Japanese food was very popular. And it was popular here. So I did all the Chinese cooking and all the Japanese cooking that we had. I found that food was a great way to bring people in and serve them something that was different than they had, and then explain where that came from and why we're so much alike. That kind of looks like your food too when you look at this type of cooking. So the cooking seemed to be the great neutralizer for later getting into business. I would bring in different kinds of teas from Hawaii, Japanese tea, Chinese tea, and then leave it in the break room where everybody could experience and label it. And people would come to my office and say, "Did you bring this in? This is so good. I love this tea." My grandfather used to import this type of tea, and we'd make a pot of it at home. And at night after dinner, we all sat down having a cup of tea. So that could be a huge icebreaker, not just in the workplace, but if you're going to someone's house that works with you and you're trying to expand and bring that relationship. You build relationship. When I think of relationship, I think about God because he's such a relationship God. We want to build relationships with people at work. And if we're going to dinner at their house, why not bring something that they haven't had before to open up that conversation and be a part of their life?
Everybody, I think, knows about stone soup, where
Right.
you have a big vat of water and you put a stone in the bottom, and then everybody who comes to the house or to the meal brings one thing to put in the pot for the soup. And it's like everybody adding their own little bit creates something totally new. And what you were describing is by just creating the opportunity, you're not forcing everybody to drink the tea in a meeting where they have to do it because the boss is telling them, but you're creating an atmosphere or an environment where people can use their own, just by people feeling good about their workplace and feeling good about the contributions, they might feel more comfortable maybe in a meeting sharing their opinion.
I think there's also a bit of a vulnerability too. We have to let our guard down when we sit and eat alongside someone else because it's an intimate act. When you introduce these different kinds of foods, how did it affect your team afterwards?
They wanted to, "It's my day to bring something in," they'd say. And they would want to join in on bringing something in. Also, they would come in with stories about, say, I remember this one girl, there was a Hispanic guy and this one Hispanic girl. They would tell us how their grandmother made it. One of the things that I learned when I started my business to train on sales training in whatever environment that would let me in, I did it with a group that was the largest janitorial service. They wanted to get in more buildings, and sales is sales. And I realized then, as I would go to different offices, that there was a recognition that people wanted. Because I would go to a brand new place and learn all about the business and then figure out a way to increase their sales. Their big thing is revenue and retention of their employees. So they wanted to cut down on continuing to hire new people because that costs money. So retention, and with the people they had, how could they make more money? So retention, how do you keep your employees there? Part of it is creating an environment where people feel safe, but also creating an environment where they can interact and become friends.
Funny, I'm going to throw a wrench in this because I hear this from people all the time. So many people that I talk with tell me, I don't want to be friends with people at work. I don't need to be their friend. I just need to show up and do my work. So what would your response to that be?
If you're asking me, I would say it's okay for you to think that way, but sooner or later that wall's going to break down, because joining people at a potluck and then talking about the food that somebody else brought in, or listening to stories about their grandma, and it just woos you. You don't have to be best buddies, but you're spending 8 to 10 hours with these people. You want to be able to have some trust in the person that sits next to you.
Talking about building trust and what you were talking about, so many people are afraid to be in a different group. And yet you could talk about your differences once you find that there are also similarities. People experiencing someone else's culture, celebrating a Jewish Passover, going to a Ramadan meal, visiting a temple or shrine, and just having conversations with people doesn't mean that you're going to suddenly be like them.
I make it a point when I'm in the bank line or if I'm in the grocery store, if I see a person that is wearing a hijab, I want them to know that I recognize them. Because the first time I was in a grocery store and I saw a woman that had a hijab on, I said to her, I said, simple, hello. And I thought she was going to start crying. She said to me, "You're the first American person that's talked to me since I've been in this country." And I said, "How long has it been?" She said, 7 years.
Oh my goodness.
Unless you were
heartbreaking.
unless you were serving me food at the bank or at checking me out at the grocery store. And she says, even at that, they spoke very little to them.
You said that you read a book that influenced you greatly, and I wanted to hear a little bit more about it. You said it was Walk a While in My Shoes.
Okay, this book was popular back in the early 90s. So when you read the book one way, it was all the things that the manager goes through. And then you turned it upside down and it became a different book. You read all about what the employees go through. I let everybody take the book home and I said, listen, read it at your leisure. It's such a simple book, not very many pages. And I said, we're not going to have a test on it, but we're going to have an open discussion on what you think about it. And it just spurred a huge amount of conversation because most employees don't really know what the president of the company does or the middle management and the subordinates of the middle management, maybe the supervisors and things like that. And people came into my office and said, I really love this book and I think I can do the next job. Could you go over with me what my strengths are that could help me get to that level? Managers should never feel afraid of people that want to strive for more because it makes your office stronger.
I work with a lot of leaders for developing, and leaders are so misunderstood as well. And they're often, what they struggle with mostly is just feeling alone. Everybody, when you become somebody, male or female, in leadership, everyone around you thinks they can do your job better than you. They challenge you, you're criticized, they complain about you. So they'll sit there silently and not give feedback, and then behind your back say stuff. And as a leader, you did a lot to get where you are. And so you sense this stuff is happening, but you don't know what to do about it. A lot of leaders, they feel so pressured and alone and criticized that they do react. They put up those walls and shut down because they don't want to share too much. What you were talking about, that broke my heart that this woman didn't have anybody who said hello to her. Like, that's appalling. So I think noticing people and having that empathy creates a different level of interaction, whether it's just saying hi to somebody who hasn't been spoken to for 7 years, or if it's in the workplace.
What I have found is in some of these people's cultures, it's a really tight-knit neighborhood. So it was commonplace for them to smile. And sometimes Asians have a way of recognizing that they see you, they bow right away. Koreans do that. Japanese people do that. They bow right away in front of a stranger. They want to recognize that I see you, you see me.
You've also traveled around the world. So in addition to you playing host here to other cultures and introducing other cultures where you are, you've actually gone into other cultures around the world and interacted. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, what we've tried to do when we've gone out of the country is to use that as a chance to help people. Mark used to go to Mexico a lot with a group that went to fix windows and repair houses and do that type of work to help. We always want to help our brother with a leg up, part of the human race. We met some wonderful refugees. The year we went to Turkey and Greece, we met some wonderful refugees that were fleeing their country because of ISIS. And these were people with really good jobs.
Hearing their heartbreaking stories when we were working with the refugees there, it's one thing to hear it in the news and talk about it and to go in there thinking, oh, I'm going to do good. But the truth of the matter is that what we learned is that just listening to them was a huge help to them.
Sharing that with other people is remarkable because you help them grow. It's once people have food, shelter, clothing, then they have their partner or their small community. And then then they need connection with the greater community. And that's what everyone needs. And
Rhody is also a globally recognized podcast host. She has so many people listening around the world where she gives visibility to her guests, where they get to tell their story. It is faith-based, so they are sharing their journeys. Some of them are a little bit bumpy, to say the least, but she's putting the same principles that she's been talking about here into practice in her own podcast.
I wanted to just go back to teaching kids. I love kids asking questions. I know that you, as a child, a lot of times parents will hear the, why this, mom, why that? I always let the kids ask questions if I have time. And I'll say, sometimes I'll have to say, this is the last question for everybody, because I don't want to kill their little spirits because they're shooting up their hands. They have meaningful questions. I'd like for you to start an environment in your workplace where people are asking good questions. It only helps move things along more.
thank you, Rhody, and thank you for